Boyle ain't directing Bond 25 no more. And as I tweeted yesterday, I think that's for the best. And I think by the end of this video, you'll feel the same way. In fact, it's a shame that the Bond team wasted so much time figuring out what we all knew as soon as they picked Danny Boyle. All right, so anyway, let's start though with the fact that yesterday Danny Boyle quit. Or they split, he and the Bond producers and Daniel Craig, who was listed as one of the people as a part of this decision. You'll see why very soon. But over creative differences, right? Now, who knows what happened behind the scenes? The term creative differences, which we've been hearing an awful lot lately, is designed to hide what happened behind the scenes. But you know what? From a public perspective, we can clearly see that Boyle needed this gig more than the Bond folks needed Boyle. Because you're talking about a director who's never had a franchise film, and is also, when you look at his body of work, while it's certainly very respectable, he's an Oscar-winning director and all that, only one of his movies has ever passed the century mark at the box office. Two only worldwide, and the second one had a little help from Leonardo DiCaprio, hot off of Titanic. I think that Boyle never should have been hired in the first place because his rock and roll Coldplay vibe, for lack of a better word, style, doesn't really fit with the elegant gravitas of James Bond. But he was the biggest name on the list of directors they were considering, and today, directors are stars too. And Boyle, even though he was the biggest name on the list, well, he just wasn't getting audiences excited about Bond 25. In fact, people have been talking about Bond 26. That's how unexcited they are about Bond 25. So I think a really good director choice could make people excited. But there's a lot of crazy stuff happening with Bond 25. It is Daniel Craig's supposedly final Bond movie. The last one was supposed to be his final one. His contract was done, and he told reporters he'd rather slit his wrists than make another. Daniel Craig's truth or shrewd negotiating tactic. Pay attention, Henry Cavill, right? But of course, Daniel Craig was in a well, it's interesting. Daniel Craig is the I think the most popular Bond since Sean Connery, and in some ways even more popular. He's, really, well liked in the role, but he's made a lot of bad Bond movies during his tenure, right? But anyway, Barbara Broccoli didn't want to risk making a movie without him. She was like, let's squeeze out one more. So she not only agreed to produce Othello for him off Broadway to scratch that artistic itch, make Daniel Craig feel better about himself as an actor, right? But then she hit him with a 1-2 punch because she also agreed to pay him $25 million for Bond 25. That has a nice ring to it, right? Plus back end, which means at the end of the day, he could walk away with over $100 million for this movie. That's Harrison Ford, Robert Downey Jr. money. That's impressive. So naturally, with back-end participation, Craig cares very much about who will direct. And again, it was listed as one of the parties parting ways with Boyle. So now Bond 25 also would still like to make its November 8th, 2019 release date. It actually opens in late October in the UK. And Wonder Woman 1984, by the way, is right in the middle of all that. So that's not great for poor Wonder Woman, right? I think there would be audience crossover there. You'll see. We're going to talk a little bit about Spectre. Maybe not. But anyway, to make that release date, the film is supposed to start filming in December. Wonder Woman's already filming, right? But that has more VFX work in post. So they need to start filming in December. And I think that is enough time for a director to step in and take over, especially an experienced one. The bigger problem is the script, which Boyle has been working on extensively. So that'll have to be reworked. It can be done, but you need really talented people. At the very end, we'll go over again who they were considering, and some people have thought that maybe Broccoli and company will go back to that initial list after they picked Boyle off of it, but they need somebody who knows what they're doing to really hit the ground running here, because there's really not much runway for takeoff anymore. All right, so who can Barbara Broccoli and Daniel Craig turn to? Well, obviously, there's Christopher Nolan, who is not only a dream director for fans, but this is a dream gig for Nolan. He has been very clear that one of the things on his directing bucket list is to do a Bond movie. Now, he could hold out for Bond 26 and get to reimagine the whole franchise, including casting his own Bond. But, as I said, Craig is the most popular Bond since Sean Connery, and arguably the most popular Bond of all time. Who wouldn't want to get to play with Daniel Craig's Bond, right? And Nolan's dance card is completely blank. He's got nothing cooking. And Dunkirk was a bit of a dud. He was overheard at the Golden Globe say, let's go get a drink because we're not going to win anything. And even the BAFTAs, his hometown only awarded Dunkirk Best Sound. So a big splashy commercial hit could re-energize his career. He can only go make these little tiny, like passion projects, well, tiny for Nolan, if he has the big ones to keep, to drive his career, to keep it going. And I think he's almost out of Dark Knight fumes. And as you can see from this poll I tweeted out last night, he's the clear audience favorite. Like, it's not even close. Now, when it comes to Christopher McQuarrie and Ryan Coogler, the two other directors I put in the poll, a number of you protested, saying that a Bond director has to be British, Harry Potter style. But that's poppycock, because Martin Campbell, who directed the best Daniel Craig Bond movie, is from New Zealand. Now, speaking of Martin Campbell, I think he's likely the best bet. It would allow Craig's Bond tenure to come full circle, starting with Martin Campbell with Casino Royale, finishing with Martin Campbell and whatever they call Bond 25, right? And they could plaster Casino Royale all over the press materials. Like, remember the one really good Bond movie that Daniel Craig made? Well, this is going to hopefully be another one. Speaking of coasting on fumes, I think that Daniel Craig, to this day, is still coasting on the fumes of Casino Royale when it comes to his Bond. And Campbell, who's directed 2 Bond movies, actually, is a very good company man who should be able to buckle down and not only do what needs to be done on time, but do it well. But after Martin Campbell, the responsible choice, right? There's the dream choice, Christopher Nolan. The responsible choice, Martin Campbell. But I have some sexier choices, some longer shots, but I still think doable as well. Now, and they include those 2 names that I included in my poll. So let's start with Christopher McQuarrie, who, by the way, his name is already being floated around Tinseltown because he basically just made Sam Mendes copying Christopher Nolan Bond movie with Mission Impossible Fallout. But that's my problem with him personally, in that he just made this movie, right? And who would Tom Cruise play? Tom Cruise, seems to always be a part of any Christopher McQuarrie deal because Tom Cruise is the one who gave Christopher McQuarrie a career, and McQuarrie is very loyal. Maybe Tom Cruise could be the villain. That might be interesting. It's too close to Mission Impossible Fallout, in my opinion. Mission Impossible Fallout has become the American Bond that used to be Bourne. Now I think it's Ethan Hunt. And so I think it's a little uncool to invite the competition over, in your house to make one of your own movies, right? Have a little bit more self-respect, Bond. But Christopher McQuarrie, I will say, is a good soldier, plus an excellent screenwriter. And so I think that he could get this movie also done on time and done well. And then there's Ryan Coogler, who added a touch of Bond to his Black Panther film quite well. Coogler, now an MCU director to boot, is a very big name these days. And he'd be able to also settle down the debate over potentially diversifying Bond. If not Bond himself today, how about the director of Bond 25, right? Also, Spectre's audience, the last Bond movie, skewed much older than usual for a blockbuster, 75% over the age of 25. They didn't even release the demographic breakdown, the ethnicity breakdown, by the way. So Coogler he would definitely know how to bring in a wider audience in multiple ways. So I think that he would be a great choice. I think he would modernize the franchise, but still, I think being respectful to where it came from. Boyle could potentially modernize it as well, but would it still be Bond? But then Spectre also skewed 62% male, so a female director might also be a good idea. And some of you suggested when I put my poll out yesterday, Kathryn Bigelow. Bless your hearts for still considering the shape of her career right now, right? And her aesthetic, I will say, is a match for sure. And she is, of course, an Oscar-winning director, the only female director ever to win the statue. She's been commercial in the past. That was my biggest concern about her. But she did do Point Break, so she can be commercial if she needs to be. And since she's, again, lost so much momentum since winning that Oscar, she'd likely be willing to take Boyle's sloppy seconds. Now, finally, if broccoli wants some new cheap blood, how about Gareth Evans? He's Welsh, so he satisfies that requirement that some of you have. Again, I don't feel it's necessary, but there you go. But he made a name for himself in Indonesia with his fan favorite Raid movies. And the Raid 2 also fits the current Bond aesthetic to a T. Heck, get Iko Uwais in there as a classic Bond villain henchman, and we'll have ourselves a real party. So as you can see, there are plenty of excellent, viable choices for Bond 25 directors. All of them better than Danny Boyle. Now again, they could go back to their pre-Boyle list, which included Denis Villeneuve, although he tanked Blade Runner 2049 commercially, so I would be very nervous about him. And then there's also Yann Demange, I saw 71. Yeah, it was okay. And David McKenzie, and we were all just kind of like not impressed with the Outlaw King trailer. I mean, he's a good director, but you know, neither of those two guys is going to get audiences excited at all. But with Bond 25's looming deadlines, we will know soon enough who actually gets this gig after Boyle. So what do you think? Share your thoughts down below. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.